Alex O'Connor has a conversation with a Christian and spiritual person about meaning and purpose, and can you find meaning and purpose without God? And the Christian points out this amazing fact that I think Alex O'Connor has a hard time with. So let's get into it. This is absolutely fascinating stuff.
Given purpose by being designed in a particular way, we're going to get together and we're going to have a conversation and see if we can figure out this meaning stuff. Right.
Awesome.
And by the way, like, we're not going to solve that problem. I think it's worth pointing out that, like, these conversations have to be exploratory and subjective. If anybody thinks that the four of us sat at this table are going to solve the meaning crisis and give people a 5-step guide to finding meaning in their life, and that'll be the sort of case closed, then they're delusional.
I don't know if I agree that we can't find an answer, but we'll talk about it.
This is what I wanted to speak to. Obviously, we're talking about this broader issue of meaning and purpose, all right? And as I mentioned earlier, there either is an objective one or it's only subjective, okay? If it is an objective one, this is about the most important thing that anyone could ever find out about their life, if they were created for a reason. In my view, the reason I'm here is because I'm convinced that that's the case, and I'm willing to give reasons why, okay? But I don't think I'm sympathetic to the concern that you can't sit around a table and in 2 or 3 hours solve the problem for any individual, because people going through the process of trying to figure these things out, it takes a long time as they put the pieces together. But I think there's a lot of people in the world that think they have put it together and they've come to conclusions about ultimate meaning and purpose, and they don't come to my own conclusions, but many have. So what I would hate to do is to leave people with the feeling like we can all search and the glory is in the search, but if you think you found the answer, then you haven't. Of course, this to me is a nihilistic enterprise then. I think it's possible to come to conclusions.
Yeah,
I think so too, to be clear, but I think what I'm trying to say is this will be something that one will experience for themselves and will discover for themselves in their own life. It's not going to be something that, there's that old, was it Linchi, the sort of the Buddhist koan that says, if you meet the Buddha, kill him. The idea being that, if you think that the kind of enlightenment which is necessary to spiritual fulfillment can be found through some kind of guru, you're missing the mark. It's something that you need to do for yourself.
But isn't that statement itself meant to be a truth about spirituality that you can actually count on?
Can I jump in? I just wanted to make sure I understand y'all's point. So you're saying that the search for purpose, first of all, is never going to go away, like, is a human condition, right?
Yes.
So as humanity will never find its purpose.
I can tell you why if you like.
No, I don't need to know why.
Because God has instilled this on our hearts. He created us to have a relationship with God, and you're going to be searching for that in every way possible until you find it in God. Any other reason, it will leave you empty and unsatisfied, and you will be purposeless at the end of the day.
I think individuals can, but humanity
that's
can't.
I'm just making sure I understand, right? So an individual can find their purpose, but as humanity, it's never going to be solved. And then you said something about purpose being tied to opposing to death in some way. So transcending death, that human beings basically look for purpose because death is inevitable, and if we can find purpose, then we can give our life meaning. But if we die and I don't leave something behind, can you talk a little bit about that?
This is essentially a version of Ernest Becker's denial of death hypothesis, which famously suggests that the motivation for a great deal of human behavior is, at least human behavior outside of immediate sensory concerns like eating and stuff like that, anything that humans engage in on a societal level, on an abstract level, is ultimately motivated by an apprehension of death. I think that's probably too simple, but it's definitely a contributing factor. I think that, for example, put it this way, right? Here's an example that comes from, I think his name's Scheffler, and he has this interesting thought experiment. Suppose, I don't know, maybe you're engaged in writing a book. Suppose you discovered, and this probably won't be the case for you because you believe in an afterlife, but suppose that you're an atheist for a moment. Suppose it were the case that you discovered that after you die, a meteor is going to come and wipe out all life on Earth. Everybody's going to die almost instantly after you do, but you'll be dead. So you will live your entire life as it was anyway, and suppose the rest of the world doesn't even know this is going to happen, but you're told this is going to be the case. Would that motivate you to write your book more or less? Most people say that it would seem a bit pointless now. What's the point now in writing this book? What's the point in having children if they're going to die 30 days after I'm gone? What's the point in doing any of these things? What will they still do? They'll still do the sensory stuff. They'll still eat. They'll still have sex. They'll still sleep, this kind of stuff. But the typically meaning-laden activities of life, they would certainly be demotivated to do. And it's an interesting thought experiment to give us some insight as to the fact that, well, maybe this means that, at least in part, the motivation for these actions in the first place is that they will extend beyond our death.
I agree with so much of what y'all say, and I also hard disagree with some of the fundamentals. So let's say you have this example of I'm gonna write a book and then the world is gonna end 30 days later.
Yes.
And so you say, because a lot of what you're talking about is what people say, right?
Yep.
So you'll say okay, so people would say that this is a waste of time and I'm not gonna do it if the world ends in 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also saying people is an everlasting thing or struggling with purpose, right? You're saying both of these things. So here's my question to you. If you tell someone, you're writing this book, let's say you write it and then you die, because we'll simplify the example, and then 30 days later the world ends. Let's take two people, one who says, I'm gonna write it anyway, and one who says there's no point. Which one of those two people do you think has a greater sense of purpose?
Probably the former.
Absolutely. So this is the key thing. Purpose is absolutely, because I love that you're asking about mechanisms, and I think maybe that's what I can provide. I think that's actually the answer, right? So it's not that people believe, and I think you're right, that the reason that this is a perennial problem is because most people do not live a life where they understand how purpose works.
Maybe. But if the world was ending and everyone knew it and there was no reason to do anything besides live a debaucherous life, eat, drink, live, do all the things that your heart desires because none of it matters in the first place, the majority of people will not write that book because there's no reason to. And that's the problem with society, people being depressed and filled with anxiety if they have no hope and purpose. There is no God. If they're told their whole life that we all just evolved from monkeys or we evolved from matter and energy, there is no creator. We have no reason actually really for anything. We're just going to die. There's no life after death. You're going to be depressed. The majority of people will not find any hope and they will not write that book. They're just going to live for their selfish desires. And that is it. And that is the problem. That's why we have all these high anxiety rates, high depression rates, high self-deletion rates because of that reason. But if there is a God, if they're told their whole life that they were created for a purpose and they have meaning, they're going to write that book because they know that there is life after death.
And what I think is really fascinating about sort of this scientific clinical approach, if you ask me, can I help people find meaning and purpose? I don't know. But if you ask me, can I help a person? The answer is absolutely. And we have particular scientific things. And this is where it's really counterintuitive. So a big part of finding purpose is doing particular things. And if you do those things, the likelihood that you will increase your sense of purpose in life, which is another thing that's very counterintuitive to people, purpose is not binary. It's quantifiable. It's like a scale. So if I were to ask the three of y'all, right, maybe let's do this, not a thought experiment, but this practical experiment. Do you know your purpose in life? How confident are you that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in life?
How confident am I about the God part, or that I'm doing the things that are appropriate?
How confident are you that you're doing what God wants you to do?
Well, in that general sense, extremely confident, or else I wouldn't be doing it.
Perfect, right?
Yeah.
So, Stephen, what about you, bro?
About 5 out of 10.
I knew it. Okay, right? So, Alex?
I don't want to be difficult, but I kind of reject the grammar of the question.
Awesome. Reject away, bro.
I think it's what a logician would call an exponable statement, something which needs to be broken down. You asked, do I know my own purpose? That assumes that there is a purpose to know. It's a bit like, the comparison I would give is if I asked you the question, the classic example in logic is the King of France bold, yes or no?
I can rephrase my question
Please.
if you have problems with my question. So, do you have a lived experience of something called purpose?
Oh, well, look, I think purpose is having some kind of reason to act or be.
Yeah.
And I certainly subjectively am motivated to do things. I think everybody is, otherwise you literally wouldn't be able to do anything. But it's a bit foggy to me what, psychologically speaking, on a personal level, that fundamental motivation actually is.
Wouldn't purpose be more the goal rather than the reason to act? What you're trying to accomplish?
It's a semantic thing, but that's why it depends what you mean by the word purpose.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So, and I don't know what I mean with the word purpose, which is part of this challenge. But okay, so like I'm just wondering. So like so a lot of people are motivated to act. Everyone is motivated to act every day, right?
Yeah.
I get out of bed, I need to take a dump, but my guess is that if we were to administer a scientifically validated instrument that measures your subjective sense of purpose, direction in life, that would be north of 5 out of 10.
Okay.
Do you think that's fair, or is that something that you don't?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know.
So do you when you wake up, do you feel like you know what you want to do and what's going on, and you're like doing good work? Like I'm asking about the subjective.
Not
feeling.
on a grand sense. I'm quite agnostic. I mean, I'm sort of.
I'm not talking about it. Okay, maybe.
I really don't know what you mean.
No, perfect. Okay, so not on a grand sense, but on some other sense. Yes.
Sure.
I find this very fascinating. The idea of all of our physical needs, it boils a lot of our sense of like feeling of purpose and belonging and want and spirituality. Like sometimes, don't get me wrong, even when you don't have all these things, you find that purpose because you remind yourself that even though you don't have those things, you can be satisfied and hopeful. But when you can't go to the bathroom or you're constipated, that kind of ruins your whole day. I mean, it sucks. When you don't eat, you're hungry, and that's the only thing that you can think about. It's hard to be spiritual when you don't eat. When you haven't drank any water, you're dehydrated. When you're sick, the only thing that you could really focus on is being well. But when you have all of those things met, every single time you still have to face these questions. Your mind constantly goes there. It's constantly thinking about life after death, what happens when you die, what's going to happen in the future. And I think that is something that is undeniable that we always have to face. Yes, we have to meet our physical needs, but there are constant spiritual needs all the time that we have to face. And when you don't have those physical needs, I will point out, when you have those spiritual needs, those spiritual questions answered to some extent, that helps you when you don't have those physical needs. And that helps with all the depression, anxiety.
Okay, great. So I think that I think this is beautiful because I think what we have here is like not on a grand sense. So I think on a grand sense, you're there, right? But you're absolutely motivated by particular things. So I think this is the first thing about purpose.
Can a clarification real quickly?
Sure.
Yeah, on a grand sense, yes, but there are distinctions that you were referring to a few moments ago. There are a lot of things that are dissatisfying in my life, but in terms of being on the right course, that's part of what life is. Being on the right course, lots of crazy stuff that's happening in between.
Cool. So like the first thing that I've kind of noticed in my work is that I don't know whether a grander purpose exists or not. I think that's a lovely discussion that I want to continue to have with you. But here's where I'm sort of coming from in this discussion. Stephen started this out with some really scary statistics that we're seeing, right? There's a mental health crisis. I think a lot of what we're seeing is while it may be perennial, I think it's like seems more acute right now.
Yes.
Maybe that's because of the atheist materialism, whatever, I'm not quite sure, but this is a problem. So just sharing where I'm coming from, my hope is that someone who is watching this will have moved forward some vague percentage points. I'm shooting for about 20% in their personal quest for purpose. And I think a big part of what I'm going to try to contribute here today is my understanding of like how to do that. That this is a quantifiable thing that we can sort of see at this table. People are sort of like at different places. And so the first thing that I kind of want to point out is I don't know whether there's purpose or not, but as a human condition, there is something that each of us feel or experience that gives us an answer, right? So you're like at 10, but what that means is that something is going on in your mind, something is going on in your heart, something is going on in your body where you wake up and you feel like you have purpose. Stephen wakes up and he's like at a 5 out of 10. So he's getting some signals in that area, some signals not in that area. You have some signals in that direction too. You know why you're showing up at this podcast. You've got a book that you're working on. Awesome. Can't wait to read it. But on a grander sense, you're like, I don't know about this like objective stuff or whatever. So this is sort of like this quantifiable thing.
And you?
I'm going to let y'all guess. Where would you put me out of 10?
I don't like to psychologize people.
It's okay if you don't like to. Will you?
I mean, I just met you. I don't know. I have no idea what.
This is sometimes the problem I have with psychologists because it seems like they're always the one just using their, I don't know, they just like to read and diagnose you. And it sucks, to be honest. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it, you're a psychologist, but do you still like know everything? I'm not saying that he's like that, or he's giving off that persona, but it is, I was kind of like, okay, buddy.
Sense of meaning you have in your life.
Okay.
I mean, for me, I'm just motivated to try and find out.
So I think
truth.
the audience can guess too.
Yeah, right? I would say you're pretty high. That's why you're here. That's why you're articulating your ideas.
Probably closer to 10 than 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right? So it's like, it's okay if you don't want to do that, because I'm guessing that there are certain things in your intellect that tell you. So do you have a subjective instinct?
No, I just don't know you that well. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
And also it depends.
Sometimes, though, here's the problem. The people who talk the most, obviously he's there to talk. The people who talk the most want to give off this persona that they are a confident person. But it seems like counterintuitive to talk so much. It almost makes them look like they're not confident because they feel like they have to talk. Not saying he's like that, but he's a psychologist. And I believe to be a psychologist, you have to have your doctorate degree, and you've been to school a long time and probably practiced for a long time.
You mean, right? Because you'll say that you have if you say that you're a 10, like you have there's this, you used the phrase earlier, a sense of meaning in life. And because you're talking about this from an empirical standpoint of whether people report having a sense of meaning, whereas I think that Greg is probably talking about, literally speaking, whether there is actually, in fact, a real meaning, whether or not people sense it or not. You could say that you have a 10 out of 10, and Greg could say, well, it's great that you feel that way, but it's misguided because the purpose that you have identified in your life is the wrong one. And so to me, the important question is not so much whether you subjectively report feeling like you have purpose in life, but whether that purpose is grounded in something real and true.
Yeah, so I think that your answer right now is the reason why you think some of these questions are unanswerable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you adopt that frame, you'll never know.
But I don't think they're unanswerable.
Okay, let me just finish. Okay, so my first experience of this, right, is that first of all, there is a subjective barometer. Like, how do we know whether we have purpose? Maybe we listen to other people, but there is some sort of internal sense of this. And this is where the science becomes really important, because if you look at people who have like a history of trauma or something, what you tend to find is that there are certain like neurobiological things that can happen to you that will literally affect the parts of your brain that are able to detect purpose. So this is sort of like a subjective experience. And I think the way that, and I love your emphasis on mechanism, and I think this is what, in my opinion, science and spirituality can really add, is they add the how, right? They add like, why is it that one person has purpose and another person doesn't have purpose? So first thing is that in my experience and the way that I operate, I'm not saying it's correct, it's effective in terms of helping people move the needle on reducing suicidality, improving resilience, giving them a reason to wake up in the morning. Like, it tends to work. And it's not just me, it's that there's a bunch of, methodologies that we have in psychotherapy and stuff like that that accomplish these kinds of things, that there's some internal sense of purpose. Now, what I think surprises a lot of people is that there are two ways that you increase that sense of purpose. The first is a bucket of things that are kind of counterintuitive. And this is where we also have to understand that purpose correlates with certain other things in life. So if I feel like I am in control of my life, then my sense of purpose will increase. Those two things are correlated. It's not clear whether it's one thing that manifests in two ways or it's probably two discrete things because there's some subtlety there. But just as a very simple example, if you take someone who feels out of control in life and you help them get control of their life, and there's a really great example of this, which is something called passive challenges versus active challenges. So there's a fascinating research on anxiety that shows that if you're someone in life whose life is happening to you, like you wake up one day and then like your boss wants you to come in for work and you have to pay rent at the end of the month and like you're logging onto Tinder and people aren't responding to you. Life is controlling the direction that you move. And people feel overwhelmed by this, and they want freedom, they want control. What they end up doing is they wish that they didn't have these things, so they run away from these problems. So passive challenges are challenges that life imposes upon you, that you didn't sign up for.
Such as meaning. If you have two isolated communities, one of whom says, I just don't care, whatever, man. No interest in having children, no interest in building societies, legal systems, constitutions, whatever the case, moral systems, none of it. They just don't care. Nihilists. They're not even going to have children. That society.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I think one of the things that will just truly help is having a relationship with God, because you're created for that. You're created to be with God and know him more. So I encourage you, if you are lacking purpose, if you are lacking a self of worth, go to Jesus. Give it God a shot to work in your life. I promise you it will be the greatest decision you could ever make. In the description below, you can click a link to help you to decide to follow Jesus for the first time. I encourage you to do that today, guys. And always remember, Jesus loves you.